Welcome to another episode of The More You Know. This is going to be the second episode of the week because I'm trying to make up the episodes that I missed for when I was moving to Ohio. So, this is episode number 2 for the week, and today we're going to talk about stonks, only because stonks only go up, and finance in general. Today we are joined. Wait, I didn't even get your name in the beginning. I'm so sorry.
That's all good, man. It's
It's
Brandon.
Brandon. We're joined with Brandon. Brandon, when you were telling me about your background, it just astonished me because it's everything that I deem is a very interesting topics to talk about. So why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Absolutely. As we kind of talked about before we got on the air, I'm originally from Ohio. I joined the military, the Air Force to be exact, back in 2005. Served for right around 11 years, and towards the end, when I was getting ready to get out, I started getting that nervousness about the private job sector and how I could be fired and all the stuff that I hadn't had to deal with really in my adult life. And so I started looking at my finances, and I realized they were in terrible, terrible shape. So this is when I was 30, and I had a negative net worth. I owed more money than I had in assets or any kind of cash or capital in stocks or anything like that. And so it kind of awakened something in me that made me want to really pay attention to this stuff and put myself in a better place for the future, especially since I was about to take, what could be conceived as a risk to go into the private sector and leave this relative job safety of the military. So I started getting really, really into it. I started reading all kinds of blogs. I started watching a bunch of videos, and just like I was losing sleep over it. I was like staying up super late at night and everything and just reading as much as I could. And since that point, I've obviously made my net worth positive, but I own two properties in real estate, 3 units that are rented out currently. I've significantly increased my income. I've started a couple of side businesses here and there, and I also have a pretty good sizable amount of money in the market now and everything too. So it's just kind of really turned everything around, and it's gotten me really good footing for the future. And now I try to just, whenever I get the chance, tell other people how I did it and what they can do to get themselves going that way too, and just to get really thinking about your money and what you want your money to do for you.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely like that. I can definitely relate because a couple years ago, I'm only 24, so like 2 years ago is when I really got into personal finance myself, and I stayed up until like 4 or 5 in the morning just watching YouTube videos, reading personal blogs about finance. And one person that I really like to watch on YouTube is Graham Stephan. So Graham Stephan is like the financial guru of YouTube of who I like listen to a lot. And I know that you talked about housing, but I want to save that for after we talk about this topic. You mentioned that you have a sizable amount in the market, and I take it that well, you've seen obviously on like headlines of like everything that's going down in the stock market, like GameStop, AMC, and the short squeezes. Um, from someone who's actually in the market and is exposed to this, can you kind of explain like what's happening, like for like if I was a new person looking in and I wanted to know about, hey, should I even buy GameStop stock right now, what's happening, like?
So what you're seeing is one of the dangers of the market, and I think where most people, I would say that, I don't know if you want to throw a figure out there, is 75% plus of people get themselves in trouble is that they look at the stock market as individual stocks. Now, I literally it is, and let me be clear about that. I'm not saying it isn't, but they look at it in a way to what stock should I pick, what stock should I not pick, and I primarily am an index investor because I believe that's a better way to do it long term, and I only do a small portion of my portfolio in stocks that I've individually picked myself. And so what you're seeing with people with GameStop and AMC and Enron before that and Tesla and all number of different stocks is people usually buy what they see on TV. And by the time you see it on TV, the deal is mostly gone. And so with GameStop and AMC, it's a very interesting topic because what you're seeing for one of the first times in history is that these stocks are completely done as a group speculation, not because they were worth anything, but because they wanted to hurt Wall Street, one, and then two, they liked these companies, at least GameStop. They had fond memories of these companies and wanted to push the price up and try to help save GameStop. And that's a bad way to invest. if you're out there trying to do it for some kind of social justice or that you want to stick it to the man or something like that, more power to you, but you're probably going to lose your money. Because in reality, what we have to look at here is GameStop's entire business model is basically Blockbuster, but for video games, right? And that I'm taking some I'm being a little facetious when I say that. They're not literally Blockbuster, but they have a hardware based medium where they wanted you to come to the store and buy stuff. Now they tried to pivot to digital a little bit and they do have some digital offerings, but the foundation of their business is brick and mortar stores, which have been hurt a lot over the past, I don't know, decade or so as we continue to digitize everything. So they just didn't have a strong business position. And that's exactly why those companies were shorting them. Now, what's interesting about this is while those companies were shorting them and then Wall Street bets started pushing up that stock price to hurt them, so did other hedge funds. Hedge funds got in that too. I think the thing that a lot of people got lost in is that this was supposed to be the little guy, Main Street investors, as they call it, sticking it to the man, but it wasn't. There's a lot of people who already had a couple $100,000 they could throw into GameStop to try to push it up, including other hedge funds. So they didn't really do anything other than hurt some of themselves and hurt these hedge fund investors for a short period of time. So I think one of the things that is really dangerous with that, what we saw and what we may continue to see, is that a lot of these people started to buy AMC and GameStop not because they were trying to stick to it, because they believed they could make some money. And so they got in really late. And then when GameStop started to go back down, which of course it was going to because it still doesn't have a great business model, they're going to get hurt. And these people, a lot of them are new investors. And when they see the market start to do a correction or start to see the stock price go down, a lot of them don't have the emotional wherewithal to hold, to stay there and do what they're calling diamond hands, right? To just hold it. That is what you need to be able to do in a lot of stocks, is to be able to buy and hold them for a long period of time. Most stocks you should not be holding for less than a period of 5 years, unless you're doing day trading or unless you're trying to do some type of short-term investing because you want to put your money somewhere other than a savings account, right? For a lot of these people, they should be doing buy and hold. That's the best strategy for your what they call Main Street investors, your mom and pop investors, your small business owners, and those type of people. You should not be getting into this kind of speculation and playing so dangerously with your money. You don't have enough of it to do that.
It hurts to see because I know a few people who were looking into the GameStop phenomenon and they actually jumped in, and then a week later, a lot of them just came back with huge losses, and I'm like, oh, no, no, no,
Hmm.
that's not how you're supposed to do it. Um, so I see a lot of people get confused when they talk about stock terms. So
Yeah.
could you explain in layman's terms what is a short and what's a short squeeze?
Sure. So when you buy a stock, you're essentially saying, I believe the price of the stock is going to go up. That in very, very simple terms. I know there's a lot more different things that go on with that, but let's just say that in base terms. You're buying it because you believe that it's going to be worth more later. Well, with a short, you believe it's going to go down. And so you're saying essentially, I will buy this stock back from you at some point in the future at a lower price. So they're essentially saying that I believe I can get good value by buying the stock at a lower price in the future because I don't think it's worth anything. Or excuse me, I think the value is going to go down based upon whatever. And so when you do a short squeeze, essentially, a lot of people buy that same stock because they see somebody else's short position and they're trying to make it hurt for them. They're trying to see how much money they can lose before they get out. And it becomes almost a game of chicken. Like, are you going to sit there and watch your ledger of what you owe go down for this company? It was billions of dollars. Or are you going to just sit there and sell it and try to just lock in the losses and try to save yourself. And it really just depends. So when you do a short squeeze, you're purposely trying to hurt another investor, trying to push them out of their position. And you can make money doing that. Let me be clear. It's not just to be a jerk. You can make money doing that, but it is a very aggressive strategy. And it is something that you either need to have the capital or the emotional fortitude to do. Well, really, you need both because if you don't have enough capital, you can't hurt them enough. So you need to have enough capital, or you need to believe something about the stock is about to break through. So those are really the ways the short squeeze happen. So long story short, what you're doing is essentially this person has asked for a loan for these stocks and wants to buy them at some later point because they think the price is going to go down. Well, now you're making the price go up. So when they buy them back, they're losing a ton of money to do so.
And wasn't this the whole point of what Wall Street bets wanted to do because they knew a lot of the hedge funds down in Wall Street were the ones shorting it, and they wanted to stick it to them, causing it to squeeze, and then GameStop rising up to like what $430 at one point.
Well, that's the optimistic view if you're taking the little guy versus the big guy view, but I don't personally believe that, and here's why. Investors want to make money. Wall Street bets, the people who are on Wall Street bets are there to make money. That's why this whole subreddit exists. It doesn't exist because it's some social justice campaign. It exists because these people want to trade tips about where they believe they can make money. So when a lot of them got together, there was some nostalgia involved in the fact that they hated to see what happened to GameStop because they had a lot of fond memories of it. But realistically, they were trying to make money too, and they believed they could do so by short squeezing these investors. And that's why I said it before. You have to be careful because you're not the only people who have access to Wall Street bets. You mentioned Graham Stephan a little while ago, and we could talk about him later, but he was on Wall Street bets. So, and Graham Stephan is a multimillionaire. So you're not just talking about people who are the little guy. Again, you're talking about people who actively have an interest in trading, who probably have a decent amount of money to do so. And a lot of the GameStop people who are pushing it up were, again, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they weren't what little man. If you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in GameStop on a whim, you're not the little man. And so that was one of the things that I kind of had a problem with when the way that it was being spun in the media. There was a little guy versus the big guy. It's not. It's investors versus investors. Is really what it came down to. And then a lot of the little guys got involved and they got hurt. I know some people who lost a ton of money on GameStop. You said so. There's an app called Blind that I use, where it's just people who go on there and they talk about their job and it's anonymous, so you can trade tips on how to get ahead in work, or you can get a referral to a new company, whatever. And a lot of them came on there talking about how GameStop and To the Moon, Dogecoin, all that type of stuff. And then when GameStop started going down, they're like, I lost $200,000. I lost $50,000. I lost my life savings. So like, yeah, that's the reality of what happens in these situations if you're not careful. And that's what I think we have to be careful with, making the people on Wall Street bets sound too good. Because look, at me to be clear, stick it to hedge funds. I'm cool with that. But you're also going to bring in some other people who are going to get hurt. And you're not, again, a little guy if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to sit there and try to trade in the market. And you're in an investment platform, excuse me, an investment subreddit. You're all here to make money. So just be honest about that. You believe that you can A, stick it to the big man if you want to, but also you want to make money. You are doing this to try to actively increase your net worth or your stock portfolio.
What you said about Wall Street bets is like talking as like the little guy. I see where you're coming from because um I've been on Wall Street bets just to like look at what it really is. One, it's a really toxic culture,
Yeah, yeah.
but the amount of money that you see people posting of their positions, of their options, it is insane. People are slinging like 100K into some stock, and I'm like, wow, this is insane because these are not the little guys at all. Little guys are like the people who are investing like hundreds or a couple $1,000s in it, not like six figures.
Absolutely, and again, that's why I said that we have to be honest about what we're doing here, and that's why I feel it's really disheartening when you see people who have that kind of capital consider themselves the little guys, because you're not. Again, and I'm not saying that you're in a hedge fund. You're not $1 billion hedge fund. I get that there is still a juxtaposition there, but you're somewhere more in the middle class of when it comes to that type of stuff. And then when you get out there and you say all these things and you're pushing all this stuff, and then I have a local store that I go to, and I go in there, and the guy just, hey, what do you know about this GameStop situation? I'm thinking of investing. Like, dude, don't do it. Like, because that's what he doesn't have the money to do that. He's not some person who's sitting on hundreds of $1,000s. He runs a convenience store. You know what I mean? So you're hurting the little guy in the end, because they're going to see all this and get involved, and they don't understand investing at that level, as you day traders do. Day traders are these people who, again, every day they wake up, they're looking at stocks, they're talking about stocks. They probably wear those stupid shirts from the 80s, all the 80s stockbroker movies with the white cuffs and everything. You know what I mean? uh
Yeah.
but like, so these are different people than they're trying to sell themselves as, and that's the only problem I really have with this whole situation. If you want to speculate all day. It's your money, you do what you want with it, but don't try to sell everybody else that you're like, oh, we're sticking it to the man, we're Robin Hood and all this stuff, which of course the irony with what happened with the Robin Hood app is hilarious too. But like, you're not that. You're trying to make money, and there's nothing wrong with making money. I am 100% pro capitalism, but be honest about what you're doing.
You own property, and we talked about Graham Stephan. One of his one of his number one things that he talks about that you should do in life is to house hack.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And house hacking is essentially buying like a duplex, and you live in one part of the duplex, and then you rent out the other one, and then you just kind of have the tenant basically pay your mortgage.
Yep.
So tell me about uh, your adventure with house hacking. How did you save up for your first property? How did you find it? And Do you do renovations on it?
So those are all very good questions, and I'll try to answer them in the order that they were asked. Well, let me say it this way: I'll answer them in the order that I think makes chronological sense. So, one, for my first property, I knew it was an investment property. I was how old was I now? 30. Yeah, I was right about 30. And so I knew that I wanted this property to make me money. That was the entire goal for buying this one. I was not buying my dream house. I was not buying a house so I could save money on my monthly expenses. I was buying a house that long term was meant to make me money. That was the entire goal, right? So, and I hadn't heard of house hacking at the time, coincidentally. I just knew that I wanted to buy this house. And then I had roommates who I wanted to live with me that were going to pay the majority of the mortgage. I didn't even know that house hacking was a thing. I'd never heard of it. And then when I read about it later, I'm like, oh, I've been doing that for a couple of years now, um, so I didn't have to put any money down on my first property because I'm a veteran, and so the VA loan does allow you to put no money down and have no PMI. So I did not save up money for my first property, and I am saving up money now for future properties and everything like that. And even my second property, I kind of accidentally again did the same thing. I did what's called the Burr method, which I can get into in a second if you'd like me to. But I had never heard of it. I just thought it made sense for me to do, and then I did it, and it turns out that that's a whole thing that a lot of investors always recommend. So I just seem to have good ideas sometimes that there's whole systems built around that I just was oblivious to. So for me, it was simple as I wanted to buy a property because I had been studying a lot of real estate investing stuff. One of my people who got me into it initially was Afford Anything with Paula Pant. She writes about real estate investing because that's how she ended up being able to not work full time. She does this full time, and then she started a blog, later on to make some additional money and to teach people about it and stuff like that. But her whole main monthly income comes from her rental properties. She was able to quit her job. So I knew that I wanted to get into real estate for that reason. It's one of the best ways to build your net worth. It's one of the best ways to build a lot of money, get you gain access to capital and all this type of stuff. So I bought a property in what I called a yellow zone. I probably think that's a bad term to say, and I wouldn't recommend anybody else say it if they're trying to talk professionally to people. But what that meant to me is it was in a neighborhood that I believed was up and coming, but had not come up yet. So it was still a neighborhood that maybe had a little bit higher crime. It wasn't a red zone, where crime is really bad, but it was something that was still adjacent to where the crime could be. But on either side of it, it had renovations going on, major renovations going on in those areas. So this property, the one property I own, is in Tampa, Florida. And downtown was going through a renovation project. And then there's also an area called Seminole Heights, which was going through a renovation project. And my property was directly in between those two, but they hadn't done much yet. So I was like, I'm betting that this area is going to come up and that the price that I'm paying on this is going to ultimately be worth it. And that property now has basically doubled in value in the past 5 years. So I was right, but again, this everybody in real estate is doing this. You're going to be wrong sometimes. So that's why it's important that the property, when you get it, cash flow is king for rental properties, not the value, not the equity. You hope it get some money in equity. You hope that it makes some value and everything like that, but you're buying it for cash flow. And so the conservative rule that I follow and that I think a lot of people should follow is 1% rule. So essentially what that means is the price of the house plus any closing costs plus any renovations you need to do needs to bring in 1% of that every month in rent. And so, for just to do simple math, $100,000 place needs to bring in $1,000 in rent. That's the basics of that, right? And so that's what I followed, and that was a rule that I got from again from Paula Pant and Afford Anything, and that's what I was looking into. As far as renovations go, I haven't done many renovations to it. I've just done upkeep because that house was a flip. So the person who their investment strategy was to buy it, fix it up, and flip it. So it had a roof that was a year old. It had a new kitchen, it had new bathrooms and all this stuff. I didn't need to do a lot of renovations because they bought it as a flip. I bought it as a rental property. So I
That
just
works
paid
out
another
well.
investor.
Yeah.
So it worked out really well for me. And now I've owned it for 5 years now, so I am starting to do some renovations. I am starting to beautify it to increase its value because I am going to do another cash out refi probably here in the coming months to try to buy some more properties. And yeah, man, it's great. Like I said, would you like me to talk about the Burr method? I'm not sure if you know what that is or if your audience will know what that is, but it's just really something exciting that I did on accident. Again, just like house hacking, that now I know has a name and that it's a very, very good strategy to use to buy multiple properties.
Yes, do. Yeah, please do tell. What is this Burr method?
So Graham Stephan even has a video on the Burr method as well, and he of course because he's Graham Stephan changed it a little bit from what the traditional terminology is, but essentially it stands for buy, renovate, refi, and then I don't know if there's another R. I think it's just those three. There's two R's. So essentially, what you do is you buy a property, you do any renovations that you need to raise the value to increase your equity in that property, and then you do what's called a cash out refinance, which you put money in your pocket, and then you go and you use that money that put in your pocket to buy another property. So the property that I own in Ohio is a duplex. So again, let me go back a second. The property I own in Tampa is a single family. So I house hacked in a single family house. I didn't do it in a duplex like a lot of people recommend, which if you want your privacy, that is the way to do it. But I was okay with having roommates, and the people that I rented it out to were like some of my best friends, right?
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, so it wasn't bad at all. I got to live with my friends, and they were paying. I think I ended up paying like $100 a month, roughly, for my own mortgage.
That's not even bad. That's not
Yeah,
bad at all.
no, it didn't hurt. It did not hurt my pockets at all. But and then I used the cash out. I didn't do a cash out refi, and this is where I messed up. I did a equity loan from that property, and I used that money to buy another property. This time a duplex in Ohio, and then rented that out. And so now I've owned that property for going on about 3 years. Now I could do a cash out refi on both properties, and then use that money to buy more properties. You know what I mean? And so that's what the basis of the Burr method is. It's a way to quickly grow your real estate portfolio in a way that doesn't require you to just have a ton of capital on hand. You only have to get the money for the first property, and then you use either money you have, or some other credit or something like that to renovate that property if you need to. And then once that property has some equity in it, you do a cash out refi, you take that money and you buy another property, and then you just keep that whole chain going for as long as you can. And it's not really dangerous as long as you're watching your cash flow. Because again, as like I said, if you're doing real estate, you need to know what strategy you're doing. Are you buying to flip? Are you buying and hold? Which you have to have a lot of money, in my opinion, to do a buy and hold strategy. I don't know how you would do that, where you're just buying a property and hoping it gains enough equity to be able to pay it off, because you still have a monthly bill, right? And then, of course, there's rental properties, which is what my favorite strategy is. And rental property cash flow is king. How much money is that property costing you, and how much is it bringing in? And that's what you need to focus on. Don't focus on trying to pay that loan off. I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of people get into when they're real estate investing. Don't worry about your loan. That's leveraged debt. You shouldn't really want to own these properties in cash because it doesn't make sense to. You're worried about your cash flow, not your how much debt you own on this property, because you can always sell this property at some point. You're worried about what it's bringing in every month, and doesn't make sense for you to try to lower your expenses, which would debt be one of the expenses. You know what I mean? So that's the basis of the Burr method, and it's a way to just keep using the first property you buy and then the equity in it to buy other properties. So that way I don't have to put away $20,000 in my own money to buy another property or something. I can wait until I have equity in the other property, use the equity in that property to buy another property, and it's not costing me a ton of money out of my own pocket once you get that first one going. So for example, in I told you the property I own in Tampa, the value has basically doubled on it. Depending on what it comes back on when they do the appraisal of it, I could potentially have, six figures to go buy however many properties that'll get me with down payments and everything else. You know what I mean? And that's just the kind of stuff you're talking about. There's no way. Look, I make good money, right? I'm not Bill Gates. Well, Bill Gates is a far swing. I'm not, I don't know, you're CEO of your small business company. You know what I mean? So I don't have six figures that I can just pull out of anywhere to throw at this without severely hurting my other portfolios, right? So to be able to get that out of equity, like what other opportunity provides you that? Where else could you possibly, other than real estate, have the access to that kind of capital at some point? I don't know. I don't know any. If you know of some, please tell me. I'm very interested in alternative investment methods, but that's why I think real estate is still one of the strongest things to get into. But you need to do it in a smart way, just like you need to do it when you're investing in the stock market and everything else.
There's one thing that I've always wondered. Well, first off, do like when you're a landlord and you don't live in the state of your residence, how do you really manage that?
Well, the right now I do manage it myself, which isn't that difficult. It's because here's the thing we have to understand. I think a lot of people have this idea that they want to be able to look at their property. That's bad. You're not looking at it as an investment. You're looking at it as a piece of property that you own, and that's where people can get themselves in trouble. I have no need to ever go by my property. Why? I don't need to. You know what I mean? Like I'm not driving by Google because I own Google stock. So that's what you have to kind of keep in mind. So when I own a property in another state, there's two different methodologies, and I'm getting ready to change my methodology. You either manage it yourself, which is what I have been doing. So you just take the call or the text, or you tell the tenant how to contact you, right? You take that call or you text, and you tell them, hey, or they tell you, hey, the toilet's broken, this is broken, whatever it is, and then you do some research, call somebody, have them fix it, boom, you're done. it doesn't matter if you're in a state or you're not in a state unless you were planning on fixing that yourself to save some money, right? Second option, which I am going to pivot to, and I would recommend that most people do from the beginning, is a property manager. You just hire a property management team, and they handle all that for you. You never even have to talk to the tenant. They'll find you tenants. They will rent the property out. They'll take the calls from tenants when something breaks. They'll hire contractors and everybody else to go out there and fix it. It's a great situation. It makes it a very passive investment, and that's what I would recommend to a lot of people. And even Graham Stephan talked about this. He was managing his own properties for a long time when he got into it, but then he started hiring property management because it made it so he didn't have to do that himself, and his time is worth more not spending it doing that type of stuff.
That
So
sounds
that's
expensive.
no, it usually so it varies. It varies on how much it costs, but it's percentage based. Most of them they're percentage based, and they take money out of the rent. So you just put
No
that in your cash
way.
flow calculation. So say again, for example, going back to that property we talked about before, it's $100,000. It brings in $1,000 in rent every month. They'll take 8% of that. So what's that? $80. So
No
$80 a month to
way.
manage the property.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's
because you
so
have to
cheap.
understand that property management teams know they have to be attractive to investors to get your business. So they're not going to charge you insane amounts. They need more properties to manage, not just one, right? They're not going to charge a ton of money because all they're doing is taking the calls, managing the money, and then sending people out. They really don't do a lot. You could set up a virtual property management company if you really wanted to, because all you're doing is taking tenant calls and sending people to fix the house. And that's basically it. And then, or maybe putting some ads up on Craigslist to try to get the property rented. Like, it's not a very hard job, but it is something that also does create a layer of separation between you, the property owner, and the actual tenant, which is always good. Because one of the things that I think can be very dangerous is that people are people, right? Like, and I say that because they're going to live, you're going to have people live in your property who do have real world problems, right? And if you're dealing with them one on one, you may put yourself in a bad situation. And sometimes tenants can take advantage of that. It's really difficult to manage that. It's one of those things that it's always important whenever you're investing in something to kind of have a heart to it. So sometimes it's okay to have to be favorable to your tenants to say, "Hey, I understand that you got laid off or something like that. The rent can be paid a little bit late this month or something like that, right? If you can afford it." But the problem is, some tenants play that game. They purposely do that to just get over on the landlords. And I'm not some multi-million dollar corporation. Those bills are due whether the tenant pays me or not. So it's not fair to me as the person who tries to fix the property up, tries to make it livable, do all these things or whatever, that I'm now carrying the additional financial burden of the person who lives there. Right. And so that's why having a property management team is usually good because they'll handle all that for you. So you're not the one who's sitting there and taking those calls and trying to make the tough decisions on whether or not you're going to allow this person to, miss rent this month or pay you late this month or all these type of things. And additionally, they screen the clients for you. They're going to look into their credit history. They're going to call the former landlords and everything like that to see how this person is as a tenant. They're going to check all that. They're going to hold the safety deposit for you because that's another thing you have to be careful about. Safety deposits have to be kept like in an account and can't be touched until that person moves out and everything, right? And there's some other legality things with that, but it's really good to hire a property management team, and it's something that I'm definitely going to be doing for my out of state properties now. And especially as I continue to try to find more properties that I want up in that area that I've currently purchased. And I'm not saying it on purpose because there's still good deals there, and I don't need everybody to flood there if they listen to this.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, this is all like mind blowing to me because for me, I've always wanted to do either house hacking or just owning a property in general. And then honestly, a duplex sounds more attractive because it's two little houses, or well, not little houses, but like apartments that you can just charge for like a grand a month. And if you pay a good down payment, that can pay for a lot of it and be extra money in your pocket every single month.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Multi-unit properties are definitely a really good way to increase the cash flow rate for a specific property. But you have to be careful as well because just like anything else, make sure you're analyzing the deal in the best of terms. Make sure your fundamentals are met by every property you look at, whether it's a multi-unit or a single family. And with a multi-unit, it can also be sometimes harder to get the appropriate financing, depending on what bank you go with and depending on your own credit score and like everything that you've got going on, right? Multi units are looked at a little bit different, but for most loans, you can get a traditional style loan for a multi unit property as long as it doesn't have more than 4 units. That's the general rule, but there's always going to be some fluctuation depending on again who you're working with and the economy and all of these other things going on. So just be aware of that. But yeah, multi units are definitely a pretty good way to increase your cash flow rate for a property.
So, looking at multi-unit places, do you like when you were looking at your duplex in Ohio? Was it outdated? Well, actually, no, because you said that that one was like basically flipped.
No,
Was
no,
it?
no, no. The
Was
one
that
in
the one?
Tampa was the one that flipped. It was outdated.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I did have to put some money into it. It wasn't. It's these are the things. This is another rule that you have to be careful of too. What kind of real estate investor are you trying to be? And when I said already, you have your three main ways to make money there, but you also have to understand. I'm not buying a place that I'm going to live in. So I'm not trying to buy a place that's up to my standards necessary for a living. I need to buy a place that I know I can rent out. And so,
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
well, well. Like if like I feel like if you put more into the property, because like for me, I've been living in apartments, and this is my first duplex right now, and I'm just looking around it, and I'm like, if you if you just done like some things to like the walls and just upgraded some things, I feel like that can bring out the whole value, well, more value out of the apartment, out of the unit, and you can essentially charge more for like a couple $1,000 investment that you can easily get back in like a year if you do it correctly and if you can negotiate some deals.
Absolutely. And again, it depends on several factors. You have to look at what state the property is currently in, what is the market rate for rental properties in those areas, no matter if you fix it up or not, and then make that calculation of whether or not you want to do it. Again, it's a risk, and but you're absolutely right. You can take certain properties, upgrade them to a certain extent, and get more money out of that. However, that's not always necessary depending on what kind of rental you're doing. Again, if the house that I bought in Ohio, it did need some work, but not a ton. The foundation of it was good. You know what I mean? Like it needed like carpet replaced, maybe some painting and stuff like that. Like that's not anything major. You know what I mean? So it did need some work. I had to replace some sinks and stuff like that. Like just some general stuff, smaller things. But yeah, if I wanted to and try to make it more of a luxury rental, I could try, but in that area, it wouldn't make sense. Now, the house in Tampa, I could make that one a luxury rental if I wanted to. If I wanted to put the capital outlay to do so, could easily be a luxury rental. So you just have to understand again the markets where you're getting the property and also what you're trying to do with the individual properties. So if you want to make a luxury rental, you're going to spend a lot more money up front and hope that you make it back. It's generally speaking easier to make a indescript property, which is very bland, very simple, because you'll get more people to rent it that way. And is if you get a tenant who's been there for a long time and you don't think they're going to move out and you want to upgrade it and charge them more, you can try. But a lot of tenants are like, "Hey, I like this place because I'm paying something that I can rely on," and your cash flow calculation hasn't necessarily changed. So you would eventually have to kick them out. Now, if you have a vacancy and you want to upgrade that property and turn it into more of a luxury rental, then absolutely do that. It's again, this is all strategies you have to pick for yourself. You have to think about what you're trying to do and does it make sense to do major renovations to this place to try to increase the rent. If you believe you can get it, go for it.
Man, you have me thinking of so many ideas right now. Like I'm just thinking, like, because I lived in apartments and like I know what I like, and I like more of like the modern style and like not really of like the old.
Yeah.
So if I did get one, I would want to modernize it, get like some nice wood floors or something, granite countertops, central air, and just make it nice and then charge a decently fair price because I feel like if you put it in an area that is lacking of some and you have like some features that a lot of places don't have, then that property can go relatively fast, I'm guessing.
You can try, but I think the thing again, you have to keep in mind that with real estate, location dictates a lot of different things. And so if you get a property and you upgrade it past what that area is, you have to think about the kind of client who, excuse me, the kind of tenant. Do they want to live in that area? Yeah, you've got the features of other areas, but do they want to go and live in that area where your property is? And again, if the area supports that type of upgrade, do it. My property in Tampa has central air. My property in Ohio does not. My property in Tampa has like a giant backyard and a driveway and all this type of stuff. The property in Ohio does not. Like they're just different properties. It doesn't make sense to treat them the same way. So in your, like I said, in your head, if you have an area that you get a property in and it makes sense to do modern stuff where you're trying to get the hardwood floors, you're doing the granite countertops, all those things, then do it. Like I said, you just have to make sure you're not making an emotional decision. And when I say emotional, I mean you're not buying your house. Do not buy what you like. Buy what the market says it wants and will make you money. Then, as I said, that's the one thing you just have to be careful of because real estate can be very emotional. You look at a house and you're like, oh, I want to do this. I can make this, and all that type of stuff. And you start thinking about it in your own terms because you're going to be the owner of it. But that's not what you're doing here. You need to make something that is going to be able to be rented out, and you want to keep your costs as low as possible, unless it's going to actually bring you money. And generally speaking, the biggest money makers in a property are going to be your kitchen and your bathrooms. Those are the two biggest renovations that you want to do in most properties because they're going to bring back more money. A lot of the other smaller stuff that you would be excited about may not bring you that much money. Central air is important, but central air is also expensive. For the properties I have in Ohio, I think it would cost me like 5 grand to do central air, and it would take me, I don't know, almost a decade probably to make that back in the excuse me, in the rental income. Now, does that mean I won't eventually do it? No, but it just does. You have to look at it that way. What am I getting out of this for putting that money into it? If it's just something you're going to enjoy, don't do it. If it's going to bring you back money either in equity or in a month to month cash flow, then do it. That's just really what this comes down to. These are investments. You got to be just smart with your money because you're trying to make more money. Again, we're not trying to stick it to the man here. We're trying to make money for ourselves, right?
Gotcha, gotcha. How did you learn how did you read books of like how to become a landlord, how to get into this process, or do you just contact your real estate agent and then you're just like, hey, I want a house, show me what you got on the market?
No, I mean, again, we're in such a powerful time, man, that there's so much information out there for free on either YouTube or blogs, And here's one tip I'll give people when they start, if they want to start researching it, including you or anybody else. Do not listen to a single person. Listen to multiple people and make sure that they're confirming what other people are saying. Now, they're going to have some differences in opinion and stuff like that, and you have to read that. But if you listen to one person, you don't know when they're lying. If you're coming into this and you're trying to learn, you simply don't know when they're lying. And I never paid for a single course. I'm not saying there's no courses worth value. I'm just saying that if you have the interest, do the work, save yourself the money. Paula Pant has a course. I know for a fact it's worth the money. I know for a fact it's worth the money. I'm not going to buy it because I'm committed enough to do the research myself, and I don't need my hand held that way. But if you're one of those people who needs an actual curriculum, you need to be held accountable, you need somebody talking to you, buy those courses from somebody who is reputable, but make sure that you're listening to multiple sources so they can confirm the information you're receiving. So for me, that's how I did it. I read a bunch of blogs, I watched a bunch of videos. I did not buy any books specific to real estate. I just read a bunch of stuff because it's all out there. And then you can do some trial and error too. You get something like LegalZoom. LegalZoom or other websites usually have like a free 30 days. Well, go there, get your rental contracts, and they have it by state. They have it by what state your property is in, and they'll give you a rental contract. And you, to be fair, I have a background in contract management and writing contracts and stuff like that, so I can read it a little bit better than the layperson. But if you're worried about it, just have a lawyer, consult with a lawyer for maybe an hour. It's going to cost you a couple $100, but then you have something you can use for the next probably 5 to 10 years because real estate laws don't change a ton. And then find you a good real estate agent in the state that you're planning to look at, and then have them help you out. There are real estate agents who specifically work with investors. They know what to look for, and they can make recommendations because they make money when you make money. They need your repeat business, and they know that if you're going to buy multiple properties in that area, they need to treat you well. And so it's not that difficult. I think that's one of the things that halts a lot of people from doing this. They're really scared. They're worried about what it means to be a landlord. But think about it this way: how often are you talking to your landlord? Maybe
Not
once a
often.
month. Yeah,
Yeah, not often, unless
and that's
something
most
happens.
people. That's most people. You will possibly have bad tenants going into this game. That's why, again, a property manager is probably recommendable because you don't have to deal with that. But in general, if you want to be your own landlord, just think about how often you talk to your landlord. And you usually only talk to them if something's wrong. And if something's wrong, you just have somebody go out and fix it. Or if you're handy yourself and you have the proper licenses, depending on what it is, go fix it yourself. Like it's really not that big of a deal because people just want the property. They don't care who you are. They don't care to know about you or any of that type of stuff. And some people will try to screw you over, and that's why you have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and screening your tenants. But my recommendation for most people, especially on your first property, get a property management team. It costs you. It's build it into your cash flow model, your cash flow calculation. Build it into your cash flow calculation to make sure that you're not gonna now be losing money on the deal because you hired a property management team. But yeah, just hire them. That's what they're there for. And again, a lot of them charge like 8%, 10%, whatever the percentage is. to run it. It's not a lot of money. It's just worth it, in my opinion. And again, if you're that close to the margins that you can't afford a property management team, you probably should pass on that deal.
Interesting. Yeah. You definitely gave me a lot to think about, like the way that I kind of view being a landlord and just getting into property in general. I definitely learned a lot in this session. It makes me more hungry of like wanting to finally just own a property already. But the goal is down the road, maybe late 20s, maybe early 30s, because uh, real estate, being a just renting a property out, is the probably the most amazing cash flow there can be out there. And hearing Graham Steffens and just like your success stories just inspires it and kind of confirms of like how amazing that uh that just renting out property can really be. But that we are about out of time now. But I like this episode. It was just very informative with like stuff that I want to do, but I don't know many people myself that do it. So hearing it firsthand from like someone who's done it and has had relative success with it was very, very nice. But Brandon, thank you for coming on. Where can my listeners find you on?
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me on. And if you or your listeners, anybody ever wants to reach me on this, I'm going to share here in a second, of course, where my podcast is. And on my podcast, you'll be able to find my social medias. Hit me up. I love talking about this stuff for free. I'm not running any courses or charging anybody for consulting or anything like that. It's just something that I'm deeply interested in. And I very much believe in helping people with their economic empowerment, because I believe the world's a better place when people aren't starving and dying. Sue me, um, so you can find me at the Starting Nowhere podcast. It's available everywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube, because I do shoot mine in video. So if you want to see what stupid face goes with a stupid voice, please check out the YouTube channel at Starting Nowhere. And I'm on Facebook at Starting Nowhere Podcast, on Instagram at Starting Nowhere Pod, and at Twitter, on Twitter at Starting Nowhere. So please, if anybody has any questions about anything I've said here, or they just want to tell me I'm dumb, come look me up. Come tell me why I'm dumb, or come ask me some questions. I just want to help anybody I can, because I do feel that this is some information that a lot of people need and can help them improve their lives in some pretty meaningful ways. But they also just need to be careful. That's all.
Yeah, most definitely, guys. I will have everything Brandon just listed in the description of this podcast. Hopefully, soon we will transition over to a video podcast. But Brandon, thanks so much for coming on such short notice. I do appreciate it, and you were very informative. And I can't wait till this episode goes out.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. All right, and that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this show of The More You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It'll certainly help me out in the algorithm, and be sure to subscribe or follow to The More You Know on your favorite podcasting platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And lastly, if you would like to contribute to The More You Know, you can head over to anchor.fm /The More You Know Pod and contribute any monetary value to help the quality of the show, and in the future bring on some more interesting guests. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of my listeners, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.